Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Since the Kabul takeover by the Afghan Taliban back in 2021, after the hasty international troops withdrawal, we have witnessed a resurgence of terrorism here in Pakistan, mostly claimed by banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, using the Afghan soil, and Pakistani authorities conveying to the Afghan de facto authorities that they need to fulfill an international obligation as per their commitment in the Doha peace deal, that they won't allow the Afghan soil to be used against any other country. However, there has been a pattern of denial on the part of the interim Afghan authorities to the presence of banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan on the Afghan soil. We've also seen there have been multiple reports regarding the presence of the militant outfits and the terrorist groups operating from Afghan soil. Now, the most recently released report by the UN team, which monitors the terrorist groups, has submitted its 15th report to the United Nations Security Council, saying that banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is now the largest terrorist group in Afghanistan. Let me quote an excerpt from it, that the Taliban do not conceive of TTP as a terrorist group. The bonds are close and the debt owed to TTP significant. Unquote. This particular report also talks about the strength of TTP that happens to be from 6,000 to 6,500. Also talks about at the scale at which the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan operates. Also talks about the number of attacks in Pakistan in different years, including 2021, 2022. I'll come back to this one also. Here is the slide on your TV screen, South Asia Terrorism Portal, that talks about the number of incidents that happened in year 2023 were 527. And when we specifically talk about the year 2024, these total incidents of killing from terrorism had been 394. When we talk about the monthly incidents and the casualties related to that, month of January in 2024, there were 44 civilian casualties with 49 security personnel. Also, separately, as you can see in this particular graph, in the month of February 2024, civilians were 64 and security forces personnel were 42. In March 2024, the civilians were 21 and the security forces personnel 41. When you talk about April 2024, civilians were 39 and security forces were 48. Talking about specifically about month of May, 43 civilians and 41 security personnel. And June 2024, civilians were 30 and the number of security forces personnel was 54. So these number of stats, these stats were pertinent to be mentioned over here. Let me talk about this particular report by the UN team that monitors the terrorist group, which it has submitted to the United Nations Security Council. Let me quote an excerpt mentioning the number of incidents in year 2021, 22 and 23. TTP has intensified attacks against Pakistan, significantly increasing from 573 in 2021 to 715 in 2022 and 1,210 in 2023, with the trend continuing into 2024 also. This particular report also talks about the kind of support banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is getting. It is getting the support in forms of supply of weapons and the permission of recruitment and training from the Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent. Let me quote an excerpt from the report that says, AQIS assists TTP in conducting terrorist attacks inside Pakistan, with Tehrik-e-Jihad Pakistan claiming responsibility so as to relieve the pressure to the de facto Afghan authorities, unquote. Also talks about the Al-Qaeda cells are operating in multiple Afghan provinces as well. Now, specifically talking about the strength of the IS Khorasan, the report talks about that IS Khorasan has from 4,000 to 6,000 fighters, while others assess that the core strength is from 2,000 to 3,500. It also talks about, we have seen in the recent past that the de facto authorities in Kabul have claimed to have targeted specifically IS Khorasan. And referring to that particular claim of Kabul, this particular report says that Kabul's claims that its operations had pushed key ISK personnel across its borders. The report also has voiced the concern over the impact this displacement would have on the security situation in the neighboring countries also. On the other hand, we have also seen there were certain voices from within the ranks of Afghan Taliban, as we have seen a repeated pattern of denial of banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan on the Afghan soil. There had been calling upon the Pakistani authorities to enter into negotiations with the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, which has once again been clearly ruled out by Pakistani authorities, with the Foreign Office spokesperson Mumtaza Baloch during her previous week's weekly press briefing ruling out any sort of talks with this particular terrorist group. Let me quickly bring in our panelists to talk about this important issue. In the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Fida Bazai. He is the Afghan affairs expert. Dr. Bazai, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. On Skype at the same time, we are honored to have been joined by Lt.Gen retired Moin Haider. He is senior analyst. General Haider, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. We really, I guess we haven't been able to connect so far with General Haider. As soon as we connect with him, I will take him on board as well and try to understand his analysis regarding as to what this particular report depicts. What is the significance of such reports? They have the findings as to what is happening, especially in Afghanistan, Dr. Bazai. Now, when we talk about, we've got the stats, we've got the findings. Now, what can be done on the basis of such a report?
Thank you, Jawad, for inviting me on this subject. I mean, it is very alarming. It is very alarming that there are international reports are coming, and international reports are confirming the number of Taliban personnel in Afghanistan. So, on the one hand, it is very dangerous that Taliban presence has been verified by not any agency that belongs to a country, but internationally recognized United Nations team, monitoring team that is monitoring the terrorist activities in different countries. On the other hand, it is verifying, it is supporting Pakistan's claim that Tehrik-Taliban Pakistan has been receiving various kind of support from Afghanistan. This support is coming in the form of insurgency, sanctuary. They are giving it sanctuary, they are giving it weapons, and they are giving it space. And in 2008 and 9, there was a comprehensive report by Professor Seth Jones. He is a very prominent scholar on counterinsurgency. According to his report, it was published by RAND organization. It says that any organization that has external support, the elimination of that terrorist organization is very difficult. So, for eliminating any terrorist organization or insurgent organization, it is extremely essential to first eliminate its sanctuaries. As long as it is getting sanctuaries in other part of the country or in another country, it would be very difficult to put pressure on such kind of organization. No matter how much you are, like he exactly used the word that if you don't destroy the factory, no matter how much parcel you are getting out of the market, does not matter. So, this factory in this case is definitely located in Afghanistan.
Talking about the support that banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is getting specifically from Al-Qaeda in terms of supply of weapon and the permission of training, how do you look at that, this particular collaboration between the two groups?
I mean, there is no doubt that they have been in alliance from the very beginning. Even in alliance when the US forces were there in Afghanistan, there was an alliance between Tehrik-Taliban Pakistan and Al-Qaeda, and they were getting all sophisticated training from Al-Qaeda here in North and South Waziristan. But as now they are having another better opportunity to work there closely, there are reports of differences between TTP and Khorasan, but there are close evidence that they are operating with Al-Qaeda very closely.
Right, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by another participant, Dr. Shafqat Munir, is security analyst. Dr. Munir, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also, on Skype, we are joined by Lt.Gen retired Uddin, Haider, senior analyst. General Haider, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Munir, when we talk about this particular recently released report by the UN monitoring team that monitors the terrorist groups, it has submitted its 15th report. We've also seen a similar report earlier also. So these reports depicting as to this time around, it is talked about TTP, the biggest terrorist group that is operating from Afghan soil, from a dozen of terrorist and militant organizations already operating from Afghan soil. Now, these reports, we get the findings, we get the stats. Where to heads from here onwards? What can be done after such reports are released?
I think, Pakistan has already been having these assertions that these are the terrorist groups operating there. Pakistan provided evidence to the world also. But this report is unique in the sense because I serve with UN. I know such reports are prepared carefully, and when they made it public, it means a lot, which means that it's factual. So now the facts are before everyone. And now this is the time that, you said that how from here. So simply it is, clear that the UN report is there. It should be debated at the UN because already the report is submitted to the Security Council. The issue will be debated, and certainly Pakistan will take a strong stand there. And now the world has to take a decision whether, they have to stop it now here, or it will be some lingering practice used. But now there is no doubt that now action is needed.
Now action is needed. How do you look at the timing of the release of this particular report? Most recently, we have seen the Doha 3 format talks happening under the auspices of the United Nations in particular. This was the only time the de facto authorities in Afghanistan participated in this one. And right after that particular Doha 3 format, this particular report has been submitted to the Security Council and released, made public as well. How do you correlate
I think
this?
that will strengthen Pakistan and those who want peace in the region, their position at the talks. The Taliban would be certainly at the defensive stage. Earlier they were having the offensive and they were saying that they are not directly involved. But now after this report, the UN monitoring report, there is no doubt that they are behind it. They are siding with them because they are their allies, they ideologically and otherwise. And now the report has very clearly said even the weapons were there, they were trained there. Khorasan is already there. Al-Qaeda, South Asia, which what they call the Bar-e-Saghir.
Right, I'll come back to you,
Yeah.
Dr. Amni, regarding as to the support the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is getting from Al-Qaeda, Indian subcontinent. Now, General Haider, looking at this particular important aspect as to how banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is getting the support from Al-Qaeda in terms of supply of weapons as well as permission of training. What does that depict and what sort of implications it does have largely on the regional security, this particular alliance between the two?
Yes, I think the Doha Agreement had clearly spelled out that Afghanistan will not let its soil be used by any militant groups to destabilize neighboring countries and the region. But obviously, you have named quite a few organizations there. ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Khorasan and TTP and TTA and whatnot. Secondly, Afghani leadership very proudly says that we have defeated two superpowers, Russia and USA, along with NATO other Western forces. So if they are so strong, what stops them from eliminating these groups operating from their soil and disturbing the peace and the Doha agreement which they had signed? Why don't they comply with that? And now the UN report strengthens Pakistan's stance that we are victim from Afghanistan. We have tried our best by sending diplomatic missions, taking up the matter at the highest level, at the intelligence level, and requesting them to please control these elements. Sometimes they say, okay, you speak to them directly and you sort it out with them. But the fact is that these fellows have fought along their side, the TTP people and others. So they will never tell them to leave Afghanistan, or they will never actually eliminate them themselves. So what option does that leave for us? Now, the United Nations report, which they have given, of course, they have told us the problem, the disease, the symptoms. Then what are its solutions? Why, how United Nations is going to put this report before its august body in the Security Council or in the General Assembly to say that this has been now a very authentic report and that Afghanistan is not following the Doha Agreement and that it is again destabilizing the region. And I think on that they must find some way action. And action is that all those people who are supporting Afghanistan financially or they're helping them politically must tell them that we will stop all your aid and all the benefits we are giving you unless you stop this and let the region develop in a peaceful manner. But this is not easy to do because Indians, they have their hands, and let me say, Americans also, they are quite happy that some such groups should remain there to, bother China or to bother Central Asia, Russia, and even Iran. So
Highlighted. General Haider, I seek your pardon to hold you for a second over here regarding the Indian involvement and the kind of financial support the de facto authorities in Afghanistan are getting. The Americans have denied it with the U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller saying that we do not provide any funding to the Taliban. This is absolutely false. A journalist asked a question regarding as to the provision of $800 million, also $300 million through the USAID from the State Department. So he has categorically denied this, that the US is not providing any sort of funding to the Taliban in Afghanistan. What's your take on that?
Obviously, they will say so, but all the weapons that are being used, very sophisticated weapons with night vision devices being used in terror attacks in Pakistan on the armed forces and on the scouts and police and everybody, they're all NATO weapons, they're all American weapons. So why did not they take care and what guarantee they took from Afghanistan that their weapons will not be used for terrorism? And secondly, if you rely upon another country's intelligence reports, Putin has said, Russia has said that mysterious planes, unmarked planes are bringing Al-Qaeda and ISIS elements from Syria and Iraq when the war ended there, and they are being transported to Afghanistan in certain areas. This news, intelligence news, came out in those days. And I don't think there was very strong denial from America. But how these Al-Qaeda people managed to reach there and, establish this thing, and they are very well established and they are destabilizing the region. So one has to ask these questions. These are very, of course, tough questions. Somebody has to answer these questions.
Of the supply of weapons, NATO caliber weapons. This particular report also talks about the supply of NATO caliber weapons to the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, specifically, we talk about the operational protocols. What usually happen to be the operational protocols whenever the troops withdraw from a certain territory? General Haider, can you hear me, please?
They
General
should have. Yes. I mean, they should have taken care. They should have made arrangements to see that these weapons are secured, and they should have taken these weapons with them. We had allowed them to, road to take, these in their containers back to America or whatever they wanted to do with those weapons, throw them into the sea, but not fall in the hands of the terrorists. And secondly, night vision devices, Pakistan keeps asking them for its defense, and we have alliance with them. But they were rather reluctant to give it to us, but they are available with the terrorists. So this was their duty. And secondly, this should have been ensured in the Doha agreement that the weapons which have been left there for whatever reason will be taken, the control will be taken by the Afghan government and kept in a safe place, and they should not be allowed to fall in the hands of the terrorists. How they have come into the hands of terrorists? So this is the question to be asked. And now, since this has happened, we should find ways and means to disarm them. We have to fight them. We have to disarm them. And we have to bring peace to this region. So United Nations, after this report, must take further concrete actions, positive actions, to control the situation. Not to just say report, yes.
How does that particular concrete action could be taken? What could be the manifestation of that? How to disarm the terrorist outfits operating from Afghan? So I'll come back to you. Let me bring in Dr. Bazai also into the discussion. Dr. Bazai, the operational protocols, when we talk about any troop withdrawal happening from a certain territory, what does the international law in particular about that particular phenomenon say?
I mean, it was the unintended consequences of US withdrawal from Afghanistan. As we all know this thing, that the United States withdrew from Afghanistan not with its own consent. Right. It was forced to withdraw from Afghanistan, and many things left over from the US forces, and especially it is those weapons that were with Afghan army. When the Afghan army disintegrated, that weapon started spreading and proliferating after in different militant group, including BLA in Balochistan and Tehrik-Taliban Pakistan and Balochistan and KP.
So it's a very important point that you have highlighted, Dr. Bazai. It was the international troops didn't withdraw with their own consent. It was a hasty withdrawal. So a hasty withdrawal, do you think that exonerates the US from its responsibility of having taken care of those weapons when it was withdrawing? Or shouldn't there be any sort of a mechanism of accountability? You left it there on the, well, the reason that you have mentioned, the hasty withdrawal.
I mean, we have already seen this thing in 80s. Pakistan was the victim of Russian weapons when there was Kalashnikov culture in Pakistan. That was because of the Russian weapons that proliferated here in Pakistan because of Afghanistan. Now we can see, and we are already seeing this thing, American weapons that were left behind are now spreading this thing. Ideally, there should have been protocol. They must have taken care of this thing, especially of the small weapons, because there were strong chances that these small weapons will fall in the hand of various terrorist organizations. But unfortunately, as big things were happening badly, they did not care about the small thing. And now it is upon them to take care of this thing and come out with a kind of solution that stopped the use of their weapons in the hand of terrorist organizations.
Right, Dr. Munir, what's your understanding regarding the availability of these NATO caliber weapons after the international hasty withdrawal of those troops? But what about the US role and responsibility in the entire equation?
I think we should not buy this idea that is hasty withdrawal and the weapon could not have been sorted out. You know, in a war, there is a war strategy. And war strategy is fighting back, retreat, and fighting again. And if and the scenario of hasty withdrawal is also part of war strategy. How come the war strategy was so weak? US who claim that their army is a world-renowned fighting army, and they are well strategizing army, and how they could forget it in their strategy that weapons could have been destroyed or made useless for others. But you know, my hunch is that the weapons were there. Either they were having some other thoughts in mind, whether they would be, you know, coming back again, or this is a temporary hasty withdrawal, or these kind of thing. That's why they did not destroy these weapons. Otherwise, in even hasty, there should have been a strategy to destroy them or make sure that they should not be used by the terrorists.
Okay, so
and why it came in only in Doha talks? It could have been earlier as well. In Doha talks, This was decided because when, you know, it was completed, that withdrawal was completed and there was no other option, then only this issue came to the, you know, Doha talks.
Right.
Though at Doha it was agreed, but it could not be implemented because we time and again say that TTP and Taliban, they are the same, you know, two sides of the same coin. How can they be fighting each other? Their interests are same, and that's why they are watching the interest of TTP, and TTP is watching the interest of Taliban. And there are reports that they are providing them security as well, because, you know, within Afghan there are several groups, and the security of leadership is largely, you know, driven by the security by TTP. If they are guarding them, and they certainly they will be guarding their interest. That's why after a long hue and cry, they are not taking care of what is they are doing inside Pakistan.
Right. So when we talk about the availability of these NATO caliber weapons and also their use, that would be very standardized and very specific. Training required, the skill required to use those NATO caliber weapons. Okay, so for 2 decades, the Afghan National Security Forces were trained by the international troops. They were provided with those NATO caliber weapons. For 2 decades, the training happened. And when we talk about that Kabul takeover that happened so swiftly, that it was also talked about that it was happened almost in a bloodless fashion, right? So the Afghan National Security Forces, who couldn't resist with all these NATO caliber weapons, were being trained for 2 decades by the international troops. How come it becomes so easier for the terrorist outfits and the militant outfits to use these NATO caliber weapons with such sophistication? So that naturally brings us to question where that particular training is coming from.
My understanding is that these National Army, which was raised by the Americans and trained, their you know, splinter groups or elements, they joined Taliban first to save their skin, and then certainly they were the trainer for both Taliban and TTP. And, you know, without their support, they could not have the idea of using them, because these are technical weapons. So that's why, you know, now it will be come to fore sometime later in another report that they were the trainers. So at least as a, you know, student of you know, security issues, I understand that these are the people, those who trained them.
Right. Let me take this very point to General Haider. General Haider, Afghan National Security Forces were unable to resist the onslaught of the Afghan Taliban, especially when we talk about 15th of August 2021, when that takeover of the presidential palace in Kabul happened, with all that training of 2 decades, with all the provision of NATO caliber weapons at the hands of ANF at that time, how it becomes so easier for the militant outfits later on to get that skill and training to use those NATO caliber weapons with such sophistication?
Yes, first of all, the Afghan army, which was raised by the Americans and trained by NATO and American forces, and a huge amount of money was spent on them, on equipping them and training them and giving them these weapons. We are told that in spite of all security clearances, many Taliban penetrated in the recruitment of the Afghan armed forces. Secondly, the rate of desertion was quite high. While the Americans were there, Afghan Taliban, after having been trained and with their weapons, they used to defect into Taliban or, you know, go into the village side. Thirdly, President Musharraf tried his best to tell Americans that they should not give a free run to the Taliban to take Kabul or to come to the center, the capital, and take over. They said, keep them at bay so that things can be negotiated. After the Russians left, at that time, America had given sophisticated SAM-7, SAM-6 missiles, which are fired from the shoulder to shoot down planes, and their helicopters, which brought down lots of Russian planes and helicopters and broke the back of the Russian invasion. After the conflict was over and Soviet Union withdrew, they purchased back, they announced a scheme that we'll buy back all the SAM-6 which are with various people in the countryside. So they could have done the same, to collect these NATO weapons from the countryside, that we will give you dollars, you please return these weapons. So there are many ways to de-weaponize. There are many ways to give incentives. And I think that should have been done. It should be done now. It should not be, we should not just allow them to carry all those weapons, because those weapons are a source of trouble for the region.
So, General Haider, if this particular, the suggestion that you've just made to de-weaponize, to purchase these weapons back, or you think the outfits or the groups which have got the hold of these weapons already would be doing that one easily in return of those financial proceeds or money?
I think these militant outfits will not part with their weapons easily, not even with US dollars. But they were, when these weapons were available freely after the NATO and American forces left, and before they fell into the hands of these militant organizations, it was an easier task. It will be a more difficult task. So now the only way is to tackle with them with the force, and force Afghanistan government that please make their life difficult who are living on the Afghan soil and disturbing the international peace. And for that, there should be sanctions on them. There should be pressures on them. And I think they will have to agree to this. And if need be, selective action can be taken on the hideouts of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and this thing, which is quite well known to the intelligence agencies of many countries who have interest in this region. So something has to be done. We can't leave it like this to start all over again, these terrorist outfit, again disturbing the peace of the neighbors, again coming, crossroads with the power, and again a big action is taking place. So at this moment, a smaller action can control the situation.
That smaller action requires the collective responsibility. The countries of the region also, and also the powers which were involved in those 2 decades of ruling over here in Afghanistan. So what about that collective responsibility? Pakistan has already suffered a lot. It has sacrificed a lot when it was the part of war on terror, the frontline ally. Now the resurgence we can see predominantly here in Pakistan. Pakistan is still paying that price of the remnants of those terrorist elements here. We've seen that particular resolve on the part of the Pakistani authorities in the recent past, the launch of the vision Azm-e-Istehkam. But what about that collective responsibility of the major powers and the regional powers when it comes to that limited or a small action in order to take out those hideouts?
I think in this case, the powers to be, United States, NATO, China, with SCO actually, with Russia, everybody being included in this, and Central Asian states, they all realize, Iran, they all realize that this is a danger for them now and for future. So they all have to chip in for this action. And a punitive action or use of force may not be necessary in the first phase. In first phase, they have to pressurize the Afghan government to cut off their supplies, to make their life difficult in living in Afghanistan, control its borders, and tell TTP that please, we have come under sanctions, we are coming under sanctions, you please stop your activities which are disturbing the peace of the region, otherwise Afghanistan will be in trouble. So first of all, it should be a graduated response. And if necessary, then, very precise, pinpoint actions could be taken by the air forces or by missiles or by drones or whatever.
Dr. Bazai, what's your understanding as to the collective responsibility of the major powers or the major stakeholders when it comes to the situation in Afghanistan and the kind of threat, the spillover effect of terrorism has on the region in particular?
I mean, there are 2 arguments that could be made here. One is the moralistic one, that all nations that are the victims of terrorism, they must come together, come out with a strategy to fight the threat of terrorism in every form that is present there, in whatever form. So, the right time is now. If they don't realize this thing, tomorrow it will be a far bigger threat than it exists today. The second one has a realistic power politics argument. At the moment, terrorism has, it looks like, just becoming Pakistan's problem. China has problem with it, but the scale of problem is not that bigger. Iran has problem, but it is not that big problem. So, at the moment it is Pakistan's problem. We must be at the forefront of confronting terrorism, and we should come up with a comprehensive strategy that should not only counter them within country, but also force them, the Afghan Taliban, that sovereignty is coming with its own cost. If they cannot govern their territories, if some elements are frequently crossing the border and interfering in Pakistani territory, then it will be having a political and military cost, and it should be conveyed to them in a very explicit terms, and it must be followed by very concrete steps.
So, okay, so we have seen the decision by the authorities here in Pakistan of the launch of Vision Azme-Istehkam to deal with that eminence of the threat that is within Pakistan. What about beyond the border? What could be the strategy regarding that?
I mean, the strategy, there could be many options. The option is politically pressurizing the Afghan Taliban, as they are at the moment in a very vulnerable situation. They did not get the kind of recognition that they want to have, where all international partners would come them, and there are Muslim countries, especially with the help of Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Iran, Taliban must be pressurized that they should not be using TTP as a proxy in Pakistan. And then there are international community. In the international community, there is China and United States. If there is this collective strategy and a comprehensive strategy, there is no doubt that they would be convinced and persuaded and forced to distance themselves from the TTP.
Dr. Munir, what's your understanding regarding as to the collective responsibility when it comes to dealing with this particular threat?
I think the stage is set now with the UN resolution. That resolution provides a political levy to all the political forces in the region and outside region globally, that they should take a stand at the United Nations Security Council. The Council should come up with a resolution first, immediately condemning whatever the report says. That language should reflect into a formal resolution of the Security Council, and they should give a deadline to Taliban that if they will not comply with this situation, then a punitive action would be taken against them.
Do you think there could be a possibility of a broader consensus among the United Nations Security Council members across the board when it comes to passing that resolution? Because we know there are 2 or 3 different parallels going on as to the situation in Afghanistan. The Moscow format talks, of course, led by Russia. We talk of the UN also holding the Doha 3 format, most recently the US being the other stakeholder. So with so many processes at this similar point in history
but you see,
going on.
What is the synthesis? Synthesis of all processes is that they want Taliban to behave. They want Taliban that their territory should not be used against any country for any terrorist activities. Even SCO has a very strong resolution on that, on anti-terrorism. They have a task force on that. So these elements would have certainly a leverage out of this resolution. And my understanding and analysis is that if Security Council moves on that, then there will be a legal position strongly in the hands of Pakistan and the regional forces and global forces to act. And now this is the time to act. If after the resolution, if it is delayed, then the resolution, the demand for resolution would start weakening. So that's the time that Pakistan push strongly through the allies, and nobody will object to that. Your hunch that what if other processes will harm it? They will not, because ultimately they want that they should be here.
Right. So what about the international recognition? Could it be, firstly, used as a bargaining chip when it comes to making the Afghan authorities to fulfill that international obligation? Secondly, at what stage could that particular option be used in order to give that sort of an incentive to the Afghan Taliban?
I think immediate after that, the next round would be in a better position. And I understand if politically Taliban would understand this, the language of the report, then certainly they will come with the preparation and they will offer something now. And they have to negotiate with the TTP as well, that now the situation is different, world is going in a different direction. Certainly now the situation before the report and after the report, to my political and diplomatic understanding, that would be a leverage for us at the moment. Now how we cash it, that's our strategy.
Right, General Haider, when we talk about the international recognition of the Afghan Taliban, we've also recently seen there were clarifications made by the representatives of the various bodies of the United Nations that the participation of the Afghan Taliban in the recently held Doha 3 format was not about legitimization or recognition of the Afghan Taliban. So when we talk about international recognition on the part of the international community in order to impress upon the militant outfits or the Afghan authorities to fulfill their international obligation, firstly, could this particular option be used as a bargaining chip, and at what stage? General Haider, can you hear me, please?
No, sorry. You have to say again. I couldn't hear you.
Let me repeat the question. When we talk about the international recognition, we saw in the recently held Doha 3 format where there was a participation of Afghan de facto authorities in order to impress upon them that they need to fulfill their international obligation. Can the international recognition or legitimization of the Afghan Taliban as the authorities in Afghanistan be used as a bargaining chip? And if yes, at what stage that could give the best of the dividend?
They have to first prove that they are a responsible state. They have to improve their HR. They are, not letting women or girls go to the school or colleges, and there are many restrictions on their taking up jobs or going outside for their errands or for whatever. And there are punishments which are very stiff for small things. And first of all, they have to ask them that they have to improve on these things. And they have to be like other responsible states in these matters. And then it has to be brought upon them that they have to agree to seriously take out these militant elements from their folds. And once they demonstrate that they are doing it, and the world feels comfortable, yes, that they are on the right path, at that time, gradually, the countries can start recognizing them. And the countries can start dealing with them.
The Afghan Taliban need to set their direction right first, and then perhaps the international community could consider that particular option. Lieutenant General retired Uddin, Haider, senior analyst, joining us on Skype. Thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. In the studio, we were joined by Dr.Fida Bazai, Afghan affairs expert, and Dr. Shafqat Munir, security analyst. Thank you very much for your time, also both of you gentlemen, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.
हुसैन दरखे नौ बशर के तारे हैं हुसैन।